Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. A little bit of a disaster. Nothing to do with orchids. Well, it is indirectly, I suppose. The nose clip on my glasses keeps falling off, and over the last few days it's got to the point where it's literally coming detached from the glasses on a frequent basis, enough to be annoying. So basically I've glued it on because there is no reason to ever take it off. You know, those are my old glasses anyway. Unfortunately, those are my variofocal glasses, which allow me to see a long way away and around middle distances, and through the bottom of the glasses I can read. So they're all-purpose glasses. They're also react to light, so when I go out in the bright light they darken because my eyes are sensitive to bright light. And so consequently now, while that's glue's drying and everything, I've got my reading glasses on, which means I can only see about a metre in front of me and everything else is blurred. Which is wonderful, looking around the grow room and all I can see is blurry colours. It's like I'm on something. Obviously not, but you know, it does seem weird. Anyway, this is a chat video because I got a bit upset yesterday watching Danny's video with her Tolumnias, and she's lost a lot basically. She may recover some parts of the plants, but without seeing the exact circumstances it's difficult to say exactly why. But I will say a couple of things about Tolumnias. They are small plants. Let's get one down and have a look at the sort of basic Tolumnia look. Yeah. Now they're based on fans. They do have a rhizome connecting those fans together, but it's virtually non-distinguishable. It's just a clump of fans joined together at the base. And the leaves have got like a groove down the middle. Now before I go on, I'd like you to imagine an experiment. You don't have to go and do it. You can imagine it. It doesn't take a lot of imagination. You've got a really tiny container, yeah, I mean small, you know, like a thimble or even smaller. The smaller the better. And you put some water in it, and then go and put it on your windowsill in the sun, and come back half an hour later. What would you expect to find? Because what I'd expect to find is probably a bit less water where some's evaporated, but what temperature do you think that water would be? I would suggest it would be pretty damn hot. Yeah? Now have a think about the structure of a Tolumnia. All of those leaf joints go down and form like a vase or vase, depending on where you come from. Yeah? That's capable of holding water. Now if your plant's growing out like that, obviously it won't. But looking at pictures in the wild, they don't very often grow like that. They grow like that. So they do grow virtually upright, off at various angles from the centre of the plant, but fundamentally upright. So if I absolutely soaked that plant, like threw it in the bucket, and then stood it back up like that, all of those little leaf joints would contain a very, very tiny amount of water. Now what would happen to that water if that plant got some sun on it? It could get up near boiling point, and I really don't think that would do the structure of the plant any good at all. So a word of warning, mainly for mounted orchids, but also for anybody who chucks orchids in a bucket or dunks them completely to water them. Get up in the morning and do it early before it gets hot. Yeah? Now if you grow outside, you should have air movement around. Yeah, and that helps water evaporate and dissipate. But by doing it early in the day, firstly, if you imagine there's some moss on there and some bare roots. Yeah, well, if I did that when it was really warm, the roots would not get long to actually take on board that moisture before they were totally dry because of the heat, and in my case, quite vigorous air movement. Now, at this time of day, we don't have the vigorous air movement because it hasn't got warm enough for these big fans to kick on yet. They kick on at around, it's about 23, 24 degrees. And prior to that, the air is still moving with these little fans. It's not stationary, but it's a very, very gentle movement, just sort of moving it around so I don't get hot and cold spots, although I do get cooler spots down near the floor. So I've just watered these and they're soaking wet. Now that bark, the roots and the moss, that's going to stay soaking wet for a couple of hours now, and that will give that plant all the time it needs to take on board as much as it wants out of what's there. And then later in the day, when it starts to get warmer, if inadvertently I did get some water in the leaf joints, which I do, don't get me wrong, you know, when I'm chucking the water around, especially when I'm in a hurry, the water goes all over the plant as well as the bark and the floor and my feet and down my jeans and everything else, depending on the hurry I'm in. But yeah, before any heat gets going in here, the big fans will come on and really start stirring that air up. Now obviously, having just finished or nearly finished watering all my mounts, the humidity in here is quite high. Because the big fans aren't going at the moment, all the moss and the bark and everything is absolutely soaking wet. I use that glass and my bowl with water in, and I pour 4 or 5 glasses of water over that lot, and I keep pouring until I see the roots are green and the moss can hold no more water. It's dripping wet, and that's their daily watering. By lunchtime these will be dry and the moss will be dry, and by later on in the afternoon, especially if we're going to get a sunny day, that moss will be crispy dry, and then they'll get it again tomorrow morning. Given where these come from, a lot of their moisture is obtained by morning dew. Well, that's around sunrise. So like I say, if you want to treat your mounts in a fashion they'll probably appreciate, you need to get up in the morning and get at it, quite honestly. I mean, I do occasionally water my mounts in the afternoon, but I know it's not doing them as much good because, you know, they're soaking wet, yes, but they don't stay wet for long at all, especially in these heat, at this heat, in those huge fans going. They dry out so fast they're not taking in as much hydration as they could do by doing it earlier in the day. So yeah, spare a thought for Danny when you've got not a large collection, but you know, a group of plants that you've had for some considerable time, and in just a few hours you lose the lot. Yeah. Now, whether that was just physical heat, or whether it was, in my opinion, possibly very high heat in a confined space with no air movement, and possibly some water on the plants. You can have an adverse effect. If your plants are starting to overheat, yeah, and you throw water on them, it has an instant cooling effect. Brilliant. But what happens next? What happens to that water in that heat? It heats up very fast. Your plant was hot to start with, and all the water droplets that get in crevices and leaf joints, well, the expression is, it'll boil your plant. And we don't want steamed Tolumnia for tea. Yeah. So just a thought for those that have got mounted orchids or that throw orchids, you know, in containers to water them. Don't do it when it's really hot, and then put the plants back in a place where they're hot, because the water will get very hot very quickly. The smaller the amount of water, the faster it can heat up. And even though, yes, it will evaporate in that heat, prior to that evaporation it can do damage. So watch your temperatures. I mean, outside in the UK now would be lovely for growing. You know, we've got a lovely breeze out there, and it's partial sun, there's some clouds passing over and some sun in between. So with some good shading, my plants would probably grow really well out there at the moment. But then it means taking them out there and bringing them back in now and again, and taking them out there and watching out for a particularly cold night. And I can't be bothered. They grow okay in here, and this is a controlled environment. I have the control over it. I wish I could keep it a bit cooler at the moment, but It's doing okay. And the reason it does okay is simply because I try and keep the humidity up when the heat builds. It's the only way I can do it. If I get up to I think the maximum I've had in here so far in this mini heat wave, actually it's turning into a maxi heat wave now. We're starting to get serious water shortages around the country. All the reservoirs are down at their low levels and everything. So it's not good. And there's still no sign of rain in this area. Up north and Scotland and that and Ireland are getting some rain, but we're not. But anyway, just watch the little droplets of water on your plants if it's hot. Yeah, especially if the air's still. You know, we always talk about having nice air movement outdoors. Well, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get those dead calm days. Yeah. Now the heat will help evaporate the water, yes, but it will take time. And in time, that water can get pretty damn hot on your plants, especially if they started out pretty hot in the first place. So watch your watering when it's hot. And then I'll say exactly the same when it's cold as well. Yeah, the same thing can happen, but in reverse. You get water on your plants when it's cold and it'll stay there because it won't evaporate in lower temperatures. So you've got a soggy plant. And then water in leaf joints and around the base of rhizomes and places like that just sits there. And sitting water is a breeding ground. Yeah, it really is. It's a place where pathogens and all sorts of nasties can think, whoa, we've got our own mini swimming pool. We can do well here. Yeah, so try and keep your plants dry when it's cold. Keep the roots as moist as you think you need to. But keep your plants dry when it's cold. Just don't get water on them. Don't take the risk. But in this weather, absolutely soak them. Does them the world of good. But don't do it when it's hot. And put them straight back in the heat. That doesn't do them any good. So just a cautionary thought, quite honestly, because it is quite upsetting when you see somebody lose a set of plants like that, especially in such a short space of time. You know, if you're not looking after your plants very well and they go downhill over several months, that's another story altogether. But when you are looking after them and they're growing really well, and then you know you put them in a new place, come back a few hours later and they've just gone. It's a bit sad, but possibly could have been avoided. But I don't know the circumstances. But I know my circumstances, and I know how to avoid that sort of damage here. So. Get up in the morning, get your stuff done, and then you can flake out in the chair in the sun with your sunglasses and your cold drink. Get your orchids done early this time of year when it's hot. It does do them more good watering them before it gets too hot, because they'll take on board far more of what you're giving them, albeit plain water or nutrients. They'll take on board so much more if they're given time. And then as it starts getting warm, they're already hydrated. They're up and running. So, yeah, think about your temperatures and your watering habits and, where your plants go after you've watered them. And plants with little leaf crevices like these, it's probably not so bad on Vandas because, they've got big vases. Now, they can still hold water. But I've got my Vandas quite wet and I've watched that water and it runs out of those leaf joints. Even though they look like they hold water, it runs out and it gradually works its way down to the bottom. You go back after half an hour or so and there isn't any water left in the leaf joints. It's all run out. But even so, go round with your hose and when you've got your plants in quite bright light, even in sun, yeah? And that water will get hot very quickly. So watch your watering. And this little bulbophyllum bloom is coming on. It's so fragile, so tiny and fragile. But I think it's going to be attractive. That's got to be worth keeping my eye on. There's another bulbophyllum bloom somewhere that's coming on. Oh, it's buried right down on the floor. I'll point the camera at it, but I can't see what I'm doing because of the glasses I've got on. But there is a spike there that's starting to expand. Ooh! Right, so there endeth the lecture, but food for thought. Just think what would happen to a small amount of water placed in the sun. And it'll reach a very high temperature very quickly, so go steady. See you next time.